Call visitor bureaus and chambers of commerce for information. Before a final moratorium on commercial whaling in 1985, all populations of humpback whales were greatly reduced, most by more than 95%. The species is increasing in abundance throughout much of its range but faces threats from entanglement in fishing gear, vessel strikes, vessel-based harassment, and underwater noise. Humpback whales live in all oceans around the world. They travel great distances every year and have one of the longest migrations of any mammal on the planet. Some populations swim 5,000 miles from tropical breeding grounds to colder, more productive feeding grounds. Humpback whales feed on shrimp-like crustaceans, krill, and small fish, straining huge volumes of ocean water through their baleen plates, which act like a sieve. The humpback whale gets its common name from the distinctive hump on its back. Its long pectoral fins inspired its scientific name, Megaptera, which means big-winged, and Novianglii, which means New England, in reference to the location where European whalers first encountered them. Humpback whales are a favorite of whale watchers. They are often active, jumping out of the water and slapping the surface with their pectoral fins or tails. NOAA Fisheries is dedicated to the conservation of humpback whales. Our scientists use a variety of innovative techniques to study, protect, and disentangle humpback whales. We also work with our partners to ensure that regulations and management plans are in place to reduce entanglement in fishing gear, create safer shipping lanes, and protect habitats. Japanese whaling, in terms of active hunting of whales, is estimated by the Japan Whaling Association to have begun around the 12th century. However, Japanese whaling on an industrial scale began around the 1890s when Japan started to participate in the modern whaling industry, at that time an industry in which many countries participated. During the 20th century, Japan was heavily involved in commercial whaling. This continued until the International Whaling Commission, IWC, moratorium on commercial whaling went into effect in 1986. Japan continued to hunt whales using the scientific research provision in the agreement, and Japanese whaling was conducted by the Institute of Cetacean Research. This was allowed under IWC rules, although most IWC members opposed it. However, in March 2014, the UN's International Court of Justice ruled that the Japanese whaling program called JARPA-2, in the Southern Ocean including inside the Australian Whale Sanctuary, was not in accordance with the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling, and was not for scientific purposes, as it had claimed. They ordered Japan to cease operations. In response to the ruling, Japan formulated a new Antarctic research whaling program, NUREP-8, to replace JARPA-II. Under this program, 333 Antarctic minke whales were hunted each year from FY 2015 to FY 2018. Japan withdrew from the IWC and resumed commercial whaling on the 1st of July 2019, claiming that the IWC's original goal of sustainable whaling had been lost. As a result, Japanese whaling will now only take place in Japan's territorial waters and exclusive economic zones. Antarctic hunts were a source of conflict between pro- and anti-whaling countries and organizations. Antarctic minke whales have experienced an apparent decline in population, though the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, indicates that it lacks sufficient data to confer a threatened designation on the species of minke whale. The UN's International Court of Justice, in addition to other countries, scientists, and environmental organizations, consider the Japanese research program to be unnecessary and lacking scientific merit, and describe it as a thinly disguised commercial whaling operation. Japan maintains that annual whaling is sustainable and necessary for scientific study and management of whale stocks, though the Antarctic minke whale populations have declined since the beginning of the JARPA program, and those species harvested have shown increasing signs of stress. Japan, echoing Norway's arguments on its own whaling activities, also argues it is entitled to continue whaling because of whaling's place in its cultural heritage. The whale meat from these hunts is sold in shops and restaurants, and is showcased at an annual food festival that, in some cases, features the butchering of a whale for onlookers. A poll in 2014 found that few Japanese people have been eating whale meat regularly since whale-based dishes disappeared from school lunches in 1987. Commercial whaling was banned in 1986. However, Japan, Norway, and Iceland have killed nearly 40,000 large whales since then. Over 100,000 dolphins, small whales, and porpoises are also killed in various countries each year. Using exploding harpoon cannons mounted on the bows of vessels, whales are pursued and shot with explosives designed to burst when they penetrate into the flesh of the whale. However, not all whales die instantaneously, requiring a second shot from the cannon, or sometimes a round of rifle fire. Some whales suffer inhumanely for up to 25 minutes before they finally die. Small cetaceans may be killed with harpoons, rifles, nets, or even driven to shore where hooks are inserted in the blowholes and spinal cords are severed while the animals are still alive. Whaling is illegal in most countries, however Iceland, Norway, and Japan still actively engage in whaling. Over 1,000 whales are killed each year for their meat and body parts to be sold for commercial gain. Their oil, blubber, and cartilage are used in pharmaceuticals and health supplements. Whale meat is even used in pet food, or served to tourists as a traditional dish. Whaling for profit was banned in 1986. However, Japan, Iceland and Norway continue to kill fin, minke and sei whales every year. All three nations believe they have a right to hunt whales. Japan claims its objective is scientific research, while Norway objects to the ban and Iceland hunts under a dubious reservation to the whaling ban. Despite it being illegal in most countries, over 56 species of dolphins, porpoises and other small whales are killed in over 40 countries across the globe. They are killed for food, their body parts, and to be used as bait in other fisheries. Arguably the most notorious and bloody hunts take place in Taiji, Japan and the Faroe Islands, where dolphins and small whales are driven onto beaches or into coves, before being slaughtered. In Taiji, some of the young animals are removed and sold into a life in captivity. The Taiji hunt and the method of slaughter is so controversial that the hunters set up a curtain across the shoreline to hide their activities from the public. On the 26th of December 2018, the Japanese government announced its withdrawal from the International Whaling Commission, IWC, the body that regulates whaling, in order to officially resume commercial whaling operations in Japanese waters. The intention is to stop the so-called research whaling operations in the high seas of Antarctica and the North Pacific and instead concentrate on hunting sei, minke and bride's whales in Japan's coastal waters and offshore, but no further than the line of the 200-mile Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ. By abandoning whaling in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary and the high seas and moving whaling to their EEZ, the Japanese government is hoping to escape the criticism and diplomatic difficulties it has faced in the past. By leaving the IWC, they are hoping to realize their long-term plan of resuming commercial whaling without international interference. The whaling interests are contrary to the interests of the wider Japanese public and driven only by a small but influential group of politicians and whaling industry stakeholders. Until now, Japan's whalers exploited a loophole in International Whaling Commission, IWC, rules, which allows whaling for scientific research. They've done this for decades, despite a 2014 order from the UN's International Court of Justice ordering Japan to stop its whaling program in Antarctica. Japanese whalers resumed hunting in Antarctica in the 2015-16 season, declaring itself exempt from the jurisdiction of the UN's highest court, with respect to issues of living resources of the sea. They then came up with a new name for the whaling program and continued with the slaughter in the Southern Ocean. In addition, the whalers have a similar program in the coastal waters off Japan and the North Pacific. Japanese whalers also undertake hunts of dolphins such as those at Taiji, which are not subject to IWC rules. The Japanese government has clearly and repeatedly stated that they want to return to commercial whaling, despite the opposition of most of the world's countries and a shrinking market. In 2021, Japanese whalers set sail to hunt 171 minke whales, 187 bride's whales and 25 sei whales. Japan's Antarctic whaling program was declared illegal by the UN Court of Justice on the 31st of March 2014. Figures from Japan's whaling expedition to Antarctica during 2017-18 reveal that 122 out of the 181 female minke whales killed were pregnant. Japanese whalers continue to hunt minke, brides and sei whale in the North Pacific. Until its recent announcement, Japan used the loophole of so-called scientific whaling to sidestep the IWC ban, and the meat is sold on the open market. Japan uses development aid as an incentive for countries to join the IWC and vote in its favor. In recent years, margins have been squeezed and there have been reports of unsold meat and retailers cutting prices to get it off the shelves. The Japanese government subsidizes whaling to the tune of nearly $10 million per year. How many whales are killed in Japan? Japanese large-scale, industrial whaling is a relatively new phenomenon, starting after World War II when animal protein was in short supply. Whilst current whaling is a far cry from pre-ban days, it is still significant. Japanese whalers hunted in Antarctica until 2019 where they targeted minke whales, including hunting inside the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary, and continue in the North Pacific where the harpoons are focused on sei and minke whales. In the 2018-2019 season they took 333 minke whales in the Southern Ocean. In 2017-18, 85 minke whales were taken in their coastal waters and 134 sei and 43 minke whales in the North Pacific. Japan allocates annual research quotas for 127 minke whales in coastal hunts, along with 134 sei and 43 minke whales in the North Pacific hunts. The IWC moratorium on commercial whaling of all great whales came into effect in 1986. Japan, along with Norway and the USSR, immediately lodged a legal objection, exempting them from the ban. Japan took over 5,500 whales, under objection, in the first 3 years of the ban, but was persuaded through political pressure to remove the objection in full by 1988. It is therefore now bound by the ban on commercial whaling. However, Article 8 of the IWC's founding treaty permits countries to issue special permits for scientific research. The Japanese government issues research permits to the Institute of Cetacean Research, ICR, which, in turn, contracts a single company, Kyoto Senpaku, to provide the vessels and crew. The ICR releases the products from the hunts twice a year to Kyoto Senpaku to sell at a price fixed by the ICR and Ministry of Fisheries to wholesalers, processors and local authorities. The primary purpose is to cover the costs of whaling and research, and although recent market conditions are taken into account, in recent years ICR has set prices rather high relative to demand. Low profits from the sale of whale meat are not sufficient to cover the scientific whaling. Since the ICR is dependent on sales as its main source of income, this negative trend makes it difficult for the scientific research programs to continue without relying on government subsidies. As a result, high subsidies are required to maintain the hunts. These subsidies have increased as the hunts have expanded. Overall, the Japanese government currently subsidizes whaling to the tune of nearly $10 million per year. Between 1987 and 2012, the Japanese government spent a minimum of $378.7 million subsidizing whaling. Despite these subsidies, whaling operations continue to operate at a loss. To be really clear, whaling as it is unviable. Shockingly, the whaling industry is seeking even more financial assistance. One of these additional subsidies came from the Relief Fund to help reconstruct areas of Japan devastated after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, and was used in regions that were not located within the disaster zone, a decision that has been widely criticized from within Japan. In order to get what it wants at the IWC, the Japanese government has recruited a number of developing countries with no genuine interest in whaling to join the IWC and vote in its favor. Currently, some of these countries no longer respond to Japan's interests. Officials in Japan and some target countries acknowledge publicly and privately that Japan uses development aid as an incentive to join the IWC and vote in its favor. With the accession of Cambodia as the 70th IWC member just before the IWC meeting in the Caribbean in June 2006, the balance of power previously held by the anti-whaling nations finally tipped and the pro-whaling countries held over 50% of the votes. They wasted no time adopting the St. Kitts Declaration, which included the statement that the moratorium is no longer required. The membership of the IWC has continued to grow. There are currently 88 members, divided between those in favor of whaling and those against. Under current rules, overturning the moratorium would take a 3/4 majority vote of the IWC. The pro-whaling nations do not have that power, but the risk remains that a deal will be brokered to exchange the moratorium for some concessions by Japan on its scientific whaling and to rescue the IWC from a hostile takeover. WDC has opposed all of the deals proposed in recent years. As long as the right to conduct scientific whaling remains in the treaty, there is no incentive for Japan to comply, nor is there a mechanism to force it to. Furthermore, if whaling resumes, it is likely that CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which bans international commercial trade in whale products in deference to the IWC, will permit trade to resume. Whatever happens, both history and current practice show that whaling can never be sustainable, controllable or humane. Horse meat, for some cultures whale meat is taboo, or a food of last resort, e.g. in times of war, whereas in others it is a delicacy and a culinary centerpiece. Indigenous groups contend that whale meat represents the cultural survival. Its consumption has been denounced by detractors on wildlife conservation, toxicity, especially mercury, and animal rights grounds. Whale meat can be prepared in various ways, including salt curing, which means that consumption is not necessarily restricted to coastal communities. Whaling has been a high political issue for the last several decades. One of the main points in dispute is how traditional whale meat consumption custom has been in Japan. This question is often discussed both in terms of history and quantity consumed. However, this paper will investigate the manner of consumption from the perspective of whale meat foodways in relation to changes in lifestyles in Japan, especially after the 1960s, what we call the rapid economic growth period. Two intangible examples that support whale meat foodways as cultural heritage in Japan are examined. One is fish sausage, a Japanese invention, which once consisted of tuna and whale and became people's food in the 1960s when Japanese commercial whaling was at its peak. We favored it not because we appreciate intangible whale meat but because we used it as a substitute for the real sausage. Another intangible example is inheritance of attitude from whale meat foodways in the Edo period, that is, making good use of whale meat. We can clearly see it in the recent appreciation of whale tongue recipes. Whale tongue was not considered a suitable food in the Edo period because of its oily taste and hard texture. When many other species were regulated and only meat from minke whale was available in the marketplace in the late 1980s, whale specialists developed the whale tongue dish. This became possible because their knowledge of whale and whale meat. Cut whale meat to loin form and season with coarsely grounded salt and pepper. Fry the meat on high temperature, about 30 seconds on each side, leaving a fine raw core. The dish preserves the slightly nutty taste of the whale meat. Slice the meat into centimeter-thick slices, and arrange on a plate. The sauce is made by mixing balsamic, soy sauce, lime, chili, garlic, coriander and sesame seeds. The mixture gives a wonderful acid taste balanced by the sweetness and spice of balsamic, fresh herbs and chili. This wonderful dish is served cold and is easy and quick to prepare. Serve as finger food or snack. Cut the whale meat into thin slices, strips while still half frozen. Fry quickly in butter in hot pan. Add the sliced mushroom and let them roast. Add water, creme fraiche and juniper berries and bring to a boil. Season with salt and pepper and stir the fresh wild berries carefully into the pan. Bake the garlic cloves in the oven at 160 degrees until soft and golden. Depending on oven and size of garlic, this can take up to 1.5 hours. Cut whale meat into thick, generous slices. Season the steaks with coarsely grounded salt and pepper. Fry steaks in burning pan with a little oil. Do not fry too long as the steaks to keep a red core. Pull pan aside, add butter and let the steaks rest while you prepare the rest of the meal. Cut mushroom into rough chunks. Fry the mushrooms golden in a mix of oil and butter. Season with coarse salt and freshly grounded pepper. Garlic butter. Put a generous amount of temperate dairy butter in a bowl. Add lemon juice from half a lemon and a little coarsely grounded salt and pepper. Cut off top of the baked garlic and squeeze the caramel-colored insides into the bowl. Mix well and add the chopped parsley. Arrange steak on a plate, add some mushroom pieces and a good spoonful of garlic butter. Sprinkle with crushed Parmesan cheese to finish. You can find more recipes here, and read more about marine mammals as food resources here.